You're busy, you've got a decent practice, but nobody wants to be decent. You want to be great, and you want to have a great practice. So how did the most productive, profitable dentist in the nation balance real life, work, and profits, and somehow make it all seem fun? Well, it comes down to simple, everyday practices. So grab a lunch, join us as we chat with top clinicians and influencers to discover their formula for uncommon success. Are you ready? Then it's time to explore everyday practices with Vicki McManus-Peterson and Dr. Chad Johnson.
Hey everybody, welcome to Everyday Practices. Today we have on our episode Doug Fettig from Aldrich Advisors. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and Vicki, how long have you known Doug?
Well, he's one of those guys. I say I do this with Ann Duffy too. You're like my oldest, newest friend.
we go way back.
We go way back. We go back to Zero World.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So I met him in Orlando at Zero World. He was speaking on behalf of Abella and Compassionate Finance. Super smart. Bruce and I had the opportunity to sit down and pick your brain and have lunch with you. And I so admire what you're doing for dentists and helping them with financial planning and expansions and transitions and all that wonderful world of numbers. So we're excited to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a lot of fun to help educate dentists. They're wonderful people, and it's really rewarding to help them in some areas where maybe they can use some additional expertise.
Doug, we normally start the episode, with getting to know you and everything like that. I have a question that we've never asked at the beginning of an episode, but I just want to go straight to it because we were talking about it before we hit record, okay? So your job is to pick your favorite, but it's one or the other. It's a one-word answer. Here it comes. Bacon or eggs?
Well, that's easy. I mean, I'm from North Dakota. It's bacon.
Bacon.
Sorry. It's in my DNA, for God's sake.
Yes. So Bismarck, North Dakota, how did you end up in Oregon?
In a roundabout way, I was in Colorado for about 8 years, and then I made the mistake of falling in love. Just kidding. If she's listening, we've been married for 28 years.
She's going to listen now.
She's wonderful. And
that's like that movie Moonstruck. Remember when she turned to Sharon and said, honey, do you love him? And she's like, yeah, Ma, I do. And she goes, oh, God bless you. You're ruined.
Well, 25 years ago, we decided, my oldest son at the time was only 2 years old, and I had a job opportunity in Portland, and we thought, well, let's give it a try. And of course, that was 25 years ago, and we raised both our boys there, and we're now pseudo-empty nesters, and I love Portland except for the winter weather. That gets to me a little bit, but I do travel.
So, Doug, let's dive into some real meat and bones, some everyday practices that dentists can put into place that will do two things. What can a dentist do on a daily basis or on a weekly basis that would help them understand not only the cash flow of their business, but how much they're going to keep at the end of the year, or how they can, minimize taxes, any of those kind of things that you could share with some quick tips?
Well, to me, the single best thing that a dentist can do is to, and this sounds basic, but is to have a better understanding of their business. So when I talk to dentists out in the community, I explain to them, hey, you guys and gals are the CEO of a small business, right? And as a CEO, you need to understand the metrics. You need to understand the benchmarks. And I talk to a lot of docs, and they maybe don't understand what is their patient retention numbers, what percent of their treatment plans are accepted, what is their production goal for a given day. And they don't really think in those terms. And the old saying that you manage what you measure. So part of it is getting them to change their paradigm thinking, and hey, you're a CEO. And so you need to start thinking and running your business like a CEO.
No lie, Doug, when you just said that, it actually blew my mind. And I was looking at Vicki like, are you serious? No one knows that. And then I remember to myself, I think, oh, wait, 5 years ago now, when I started PDA, I wasn't really tracking that stuff, to be honest, Mm-hmm. So what hit me so funny, Vicki, you'll get a kick out of this. It's become so much of our DNA that it was like, are you kidding me? People don't know that. And then it's just like, oh, wait, I was that person 5 years ago. It's just become our culture.
So I'm going to speak the next couple weeks at Oregon Health Sciences University Dental School, OHSU in Portland, beautiful dental school. And I do that every year where I talk to the third and fourth year dental students, and they're about to graduate with $400,000 or $500,000 in student loans, and they get nary a business class. Mm-hmm. And they certainly don't get a leadership class. So they're told to go forth and do something, right? But they don't leave with that framework of how to be a leader, how to be a CEO, what it means to run a company. And it's kind of.
Do you think that is by design?
I think it's the nature of what they're going through. They're so focused on trying to get their dental license that people tell me that if you gave them much more information, it would go in one ear and out the other, because they're just like, I got to get my license. But in what other field do you saddle somebody with that amount of debt obligation and then just send them forth into the wild? It's an interesting business model.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that they come out with that much debt, but at the same time, their schooling is so intense. I even just think the fact that we get it done in 4 years, the question becomes, what do we make it 5 years to do it justice? Or do we make it 6? Or do we make it, let's round it up to 8 years, because just think about what school used to teach you in the 70s, let's just say. And then all the new stuff that's come about, composites included, that was 4 years of dental school without even talking about composites. Now all of a sudden, we've got implant dentistry, digital dentistry, medical legal stuff to be concerned about, let alone all the biology and chemistry and physics. So the question then becomes, so do we make it an even $1 million of dental school debt, so that way we can have right? And because it goes year round for 4 years. And the question, it's just daunting. Like, where do we stop? And so it's tough how you cram that into 4 years. And it's just like, it doesn't do it justice. Why aren't we teaching business? It's like, they hardly teach orthodontics. They hardly teach, and every school would say, well, yes, we do. And it's just like, okay, are you saying that they're doing it at proficiency where they won't need to take CE on that in order to be as good as any peer specialist out there? Of course they do.
Ooh. So I've got two experts on the line here. Chad, I got you on the clinical CE side because you're like a junkie there.
I am, admittedly.
So I'm a young dentist and I'm listening to this. How much should I budget per year in my ongoing education so that I really do, over, let's say, the next 5 years, 6 years, master certain areas clinically, and I master certain areas? Even if you don't own your practice, there's so much value in mastering the business aspect so that you're in control of your own productivity within a larger organization. You understand new patient flow, you understand referrals, like you just get it, right? You know how to. So how much time and money and effort should I as a dentist be devoting annually to what dental school didn't teach and prepare me to do?
Doug, I have immediate thoughts, but I want to hear your thoughts first, and then we'll coalesce.
Okay, I think, well, when you combine the clinical with the business side, a significant portion. So thousands of dollars in CE in one sense, because think about it. If you take the time to learn the business side of dentistry, and part of that is surrounding yourself with experts, and there are people out there that will help you out of the gate. But what you can learn in a relatively short amount of time is phenomenal. And I'm going to backtrack a second. In a perfect world, two things happen, which is probably neither one's feasible. The dental student gets a business minor as their undergrad, and I've met kids who did that. They get it because they have a minor in business. Or after they got out of dental school, there's some sort of 1 week business boot camp program. After they've taken their test and they're done with all that, then they have to go to this like 1 week business boot camp. That'd be my ideal. So at least they have some groundwork, right? And maybe we create that business boot camp so they have some level of knowledge. But back to your question, a significant amount of resources, because you're laying the groundwork for the rest of your career and building on that.
Well, and my thought is too, if the state minimum in Iowa is 15 hours a year, because it's 30 every 2, what I think when you start getting into the CE junkie realm is about 100 hours a year. And if I think back on the cost of CE hours, the cost per CE hour, I don't know what the average CE hour costs, but if it was even $100, you're looking at $10,000 of CE a year. And to me, it's kind of like ice cream as well. The higher the fat, the higher the fat quantity, the more premium the ice cream is. So Haagen-Dazs has a higher fat content. Now, to some extent, if you got up to 90% fat, no one wants it. So there's a ridiculous amount. But when you're paying for CE, if you have quality CE, the more it's costing you, probably the better the quality of that CE to a certain extent. But I think 100 hours is something that someone out of school could easily shoot for. And the minimum is going to be 15, but you need, I mean, man, think about it. That's probably 3 or 4 conferences in the year.
And so think about the groundwork. So you're trying to build both your clinical and your business base. And like I said, if you don't do that early on in your career, when else is it going to happen? For a lot of people, it never does.
When is it going to cost you the least is what I thought about. When I was 3 weeks out of school, I went to my first AGD meeting in 2005 in DC. And I thought, even at the time, I thought, if I close for a couple days to go to this is the least amount it's ever going to cost me is to go right now.
Your productivity is the lowest.
Right. Someday I won't want to leave the office. And so let's go right now. And so all these people were like, you're only 3 weeks out of school and you're going to CE? And I'm just like, yeah, I can't afford not to.
There's so much more online now that we did not have in 2005. It seems like 2005 were very progressive, but it's like the dark ages for online education.
Online definitely is an exception to the rule as far as, listen, you can get very affordable with something like even, let's say, Spear Education for a couple thousand for the year. And if you set that in front of your treadmill or your spinning bike or something like that, and you did that over the winter, man, you'd come out a powerhouse on the other end just for $2,000. So that was not available in 05. If it was just barely. But these days, 15 years later, totally.
Takes discipline. So, Doug, where do you think doctors miss the ball the most? What hurts them the most financially?
That's a good question.
Boy, I just stumped my toe here, versus I broke my leg because I didn't know.
Well, so the 2 big picture things, and they're so simple. These are going to be my 2 main messages to the dental students next week. Number 1 is they don't use specialists. And that's not meant to be self-serving. But if you run a dental practice and you leverage a financial advisor who works with dentistry, you work with a legal attorney who works with dentists, you work with dental-specific marketers or practice management consultants. If you don't do that, when you get out of school, how are you ever going to gain that industry knowledge? Yeah, you maybe go to a study club once in a while, but in general, they make the mistake of not utilizing experts. So here's an example. A doc's going to go through a transition. Maybe they're going to buy a practice. And so they decide they're going to save a couple $100 on the legal bill. So they hire their cousin's roommate who just passed the bar to handle one of the biggest financial transactions of their life. It just doesn't make any sense. So the first thing is specialists. The second thing is a lot of people are debt phobic. And I'm going to apologize to all the Dave Ramsey fans. I love Dave Ramsey. Okay.
Oh, Chad, here we go.
Easy, here we go.
No.
Okay, Chad, put your dukes up. Okay,
No, use your scalpel and do the surgery, man. So
Dave Ramsey, his basic mantra is that debt is bad, and I get that. Now, debt is one thing if you're making $75,000 a year and you have $15,000 in high interest credit card debt. I get that. But Dave Ramsey's not talking to the CEO of a business.
I agree.
So if you're the CEO and you can get low interest debt at 3%, and buy high technology equipment that's going to increase productivity, a smart CEO is going to grab that low interest debt to grow their practice any day of the week. And so they make the mistake of being debt phobic, and also while they're paying down their debt, not concurrently saving for retirement. Mm-hmm. Every year you wait, you lose out on the power of compound returns. Mm-hmm. You never get that time back. You never get it back.
Vicky, I've never heard anyone say that before. Doug,
am I preaching to the choir?
This not only is the first time I've ever heard this, but it's amazing, and I'm going to start doing it right away. Vicky wants to slap me right now.
Coaching with you, Chad.
It's true though.
Coaching or counseling? Which one is it called?
It's going to go into therapy.
That's what I'm talking about.
So what happens is these kids get out of dental school, and someone gives them the worst financial advice of their life. They tell them, before you do anything else, pay off every penny of your debt. So if they have $500,000 in debt, then they come to us when they're 40 years old and they go, hey, guess what, Doug? I'm debt free. And we go, that's great. How much have you saved for retirement? And the answer is 0. And then they have to start putting wheelbarrows full of money in and changing their lifestyle because they lost out on that time. And it's
so
really
here's my counter thought and counter question. Okay, so yeah, my student debt this is going to make some younger people jealous. It's 2.75, I think. I've got a mortgage. Right. I've got a home, and I'm not so concerned about that. I've got a home mortgage, I think at 4.0. Yep. Also right now, that sounds pretty decent for the market. I've got other debts though that are not credit card worthy, but they're like 11% and stuff like that. So here's a question: when is there a breaking point? And the answer is probably no, but give us a rough estimate, like to you, when do you start getting from, if we're going to call these terms good debt and bad debt, would it be 6 and up? Would it be 8 and up or 10 and up? I mean, there comes a point where it's ridiculous. You wouldn't want me paying 20% interest on something and just saying, way to go, that's a smart move, right? 1%, smart move. 20%, not a smart move. So now let's start finding that fine line. What's the deal?
Okay, so if you want me to big picture it, so let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's assume you have a company 401k plan, or let's say you have a 401k plan. Okay, you can put that money in tax free. If you're taking some money and putting it in pre-tax into your 401k, you're saving on whatever. Let's say you're at a 25% tax bracket. I'm just spitballing, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, if you take that money and put it into a 401k, you essentially immediately gotten a 25% return, because you're not paying taxes. So you compare that so I can get an immediate 25% return, or I can pay off, let's even call it 10% debt. 20% debt gets a little scary. It's even 10% debt. If I decide to make double payments on that 10% debt and not pay into the 401k, I've just lost out on an immediate 25% return.
Right.
And so I think I'm very... If you don't put anything in retirement first, you miss out on that 25% return. By the way, that builds year after year pre-tax until you finally pull it out when you're retired. Mm-hmm. So if it's even 10%, to me, it's a no-brainer. You've got to put some in your retirement account.
That's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought that you'd even say 10% is debatable. Like I would have, but that's interesting. I wanted to know.
So I have a doc. They'll come up to me and say, "Hey, Doug, I've got a home. Should I make double payments on my home mortgage?" And I'm like, I'm trying to be nice about it. I go, "What's your interest rate?" And they'll go like 3.45%. I'm like, okay, that's basically free money.
Yes.
Never pay that off for take money and shove it into retirement. So 20% gets scary, right? But like I said, if you don't put money into that plan, every year you wait, it has a huge impact on the back end.
Yeah.
And I can show you tables and charts and graphs. You've seen all that probably. But
let's see those right
now. Afterwards.
I love this. This is like playing roulette at the casino, and we're just going to ask Doug questions. So I've got a situation, Doug. So I own a dental building. I own the building, and I've got a long-term tenant. All that stuff is great, but the money on it is floating at 1% above prime, and it never locks in. And there is a 10-year balloon payment, so it'll balloon out at around $278,000. So 10 years from now, I don't know what the rate's going to be. Right. Today, I know it's gone from 4.25 where it started. Now it's at 5.78 because interest rates are fluctuating. I have the cash to pay down a lot of that, or maybe even pay it off. Do I keep it there at that fluctuating rate, or I do something else with my money? Do I just say, hey, there's 5% and get that? Yeah.
Big picture. So big picture, if you have a retirement vehicle, and I don't know, maybe you have a 401k profit sharing that tops out at 55 for 56,000 plus a catch up. Maybe you have.
I'm old. I'm already past retirement. But I get it if you're younger. This is what I do in my retirement, Doug.
You better be careful. I'm going to be offended. I'm probably I'm right there. I'm ahead, I'm sure. So don't worry about that. But the point is, if you have any sort of retirement, even if let's say someone is 65 years old.
Yes.
Okay? And they're like, why should I put any money into a 401k plan? Well, because you put it in pre-tax. That's why. So if I can put the money in pre-tax, I have to start drawing out a small portion at the age of 70, not before. I can wait till the age of 70, right? So why don't I keep putting money in my 60s? That actual money that I put in, I might not pull out till I'm in my 80s or 90s. And by the way, we're all going to live to be in our 80s or 90s statistically.
Not me. I'm going down quick. I'm
almost 40. Chad, you're in the hundreds. You're in the hundreds, Chad.
I'm burning the candle at both ends, baby. I'm almost 40. 5 years left tops.
That's your downfall.
It's the bacon.
So if you have the free cash flow to pay off that debt, more power to you. But I would still say if you have retirement vehicles that you can max out first, I would certainly do those first.
There you go.
That's fair enough. I like that.
I like that
retirement, man. Retirement's king. Those retirement plans are there. By the way, do you know why they set up those retirement incentives to save for retirement? You guys know what the national debt just rolled over to a new number? And
20?
$22 trillion.
22?
So they want you to save for retirement. If you want to depress yourself, you can go online. There's a scorecard that churns real time.
Right.
You can look it up, and you can sit there and look at it churning and increasing if you want. I can send you the link.
So, no. I have enough nightmares.
So if the Fed loses its authority, it doesn't. I mean, what happens if there's a catastrophic event of the United States? I mean, like, here we're talking 401k stuff, but it assumes that, the trouble.
An economy to support it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of gets scary going, well, I don't know where I'm going with that, but man.
Well, so the Fed will never lose its
trillion.
ability to print money. So governments can print money. States cannot. That's why when you hear about a budget crisis in like Illinois or somewhere, it's different because states can't print money.
Yeah.
That's why they're subject to tighter standards. The government can print money. The only issue is that if people get nervous enough where they no longer want to buy the bonds and they no longer want to invest in the U.S., then it becomes an issue. Until then, they can keep printing money as often as they want and put it in the economy, and people buy up the U.S. bonds or whatever else and invest in our country. But it's not a crisis unless people start to get concerned about the ability eventually of the government to pay it back.
Yeah, because on a macro level, the trouble is we're borrowing this 22 trillion and we're rolling it on a certain interest rate that, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows that, what the average interest rate on this is, but obviously we wake up next year and it's going to be 25 or 24. And, man, that starts getting, and Dave Ramsey, I mean, he'd say, let's get this debt paid off. And that sounds almost insurmountable. I mean,
well, here's the deal.
Trillion.
Vic and I are going to be okay, but you're younger, Chad.
I know, I'm hosed.
My grandkids, your kids, they're screwed. But anyway, Vic and I are fine.
Really all that matters. So,
shoot.
Given that a dental practice is more like a state government, we can't go print more money, right? So do you have some benchmarks that you put out there, like you want to look at overhead for a dental practice? Like if they're young and they're under $1 million and they're just building their team, I don't get so jacked up about labor being at the 30% rate, right? Because they have to hire before demand and all that. But at a certain point, as that practice matures, I'm like, wow, your labor costs are 35%. We got to do something about that. What are some of your benchmarks and things that, since we can't print money, we have to go find the money within the P&L? How do you help doctors find it?
And so one thing I'll throw in there before that, one of my mantras when I do my talks is I tell the dentists that you cannot cost cut your way to prosperity. So I try to get them to focus on certain parts of their financials. And I tell them that no successful business in the world has ever become prosperous just through cost cutting. And somebody said, well, Doug, what about Walmart? And I said, great example. Walmart offers low prices, but Walmart's investing $10 billion in 2018 in IT and $10 billion in 2019 to keep up with this company called Amazon. Okay, so they're not cost cutting. That's different than offering low prices. So I try to get the docs to. So let's say they focus on the expense side of their equation. Right. If it's $1 million practice, they maybe have $50,000 in true consumables. The cotton swabs and the gloves and all that stuff. Right. If they would slash their consumables 20%, that's only $10,000.
Right.
If they're $1 million practice and they increase production by 10%, they've just added $100,000 on the top line. So it's okay to be prudent around your expenses, right? But the real joy is on the production side and on the revenue side.
Doug,
so we try to focus on those things. Is
it possible that the top performers that you work with are good at both, even though they might focus? Sure. I'm just thinking fairly, that they're focused on the big picture and the production side. But those top producers, are they also actually kind of good at keeping their costs under control as well?
It actually goes
secondary issue.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. We have some single practice superstars. They do $1.52 million, right? And they're right. They also seem to be the ones who also have the expense side nicely managed, tightly managed. Whereas it's ironically when you have someone who's struggling on the production side, that also seems to carry over to their expense side. They seem to be disorganized or struggling in both areas. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that goes back to
that makes sense because it takes a certain amount of discipline. It takes a certain amount of focus and intention to be productive. So if you don't have that, organized that way, it would carry over in other parts of your life.
So a couple of specific metrics, Vicki. So let's say our average solo doc does about $1 million, okay? And they have 3 operatories and 1.5 hygienists. And so their average net income for us is about $350,000. So they're bringing in about 35% after all said and done.
That's before they pay themselves. That includes their salary, or after their salary?
That's before. So they're grossing 300. That's after expenses. So they're 350,000. Okay, pre-tax. So depending on taxes and everything else. So there's certainly room for them to grow. And I know we've talked about some superstar dentists and some of the docs that you work with. That there is, for some of them, they're perfectly, I don't want to say fine with that, but they are. They're not going to ever be on food stamps. They're not ever going to live under a bridge down by the river, right? You know, they don't really have to make any changes unless they choose to want to embrace making their practice all it can be. I don't want to get too touchy-feely, but you know what I'm saying? Unless they have that drive.
Okay, and I want to be really clear here too, because the way that we have our doctors and at PDA set up their profit and loss statements is that they are paid, a W-2 wage as if they were an associate in their own practice, and then it comes down to the net income, their EBITDA before taxes. So that $350,000 you're describing as profit might look like $200,000 in salary and $150,000 in owner's net profit.
Correct.
Just to be, it's hard when you're not actually looking at something to visualize it. But I don't want my PDA doctors going, "Hey, Doug's practices are they produce less and they take home $350 and I only take home $150. What's up with that?" And I was like, "Well,
think about this too. The ADA magazines, once every year ish, will say, the average dentist is doing this nationally, or they'll do it regionally too, and they'll say, in the Midwest, the average dentist brings home $135,000, and I'm just thinking, the average dentist? I mean, that's kind of peculiar. When they put out those numbers, which is way off from stuff that you're saying, and I'm not saying that number's accurate. At one point, it was. I don't, recall, but it's certainly they were not reporting 350. I wonder if people are putting on humble faces when they write in their answers because this is probably self-reported, or what.
I think part of it's not apples to apples. So when you get those broad surveys that the labor department does or the ADA or whatever, they're including community health professionals, which is wonderful. They're including some part-time dental workers. So you're taking a big aggregate. And when you start to look at, we're talking about docs who are locked and loaded, who are working 4 days a week, all that stuff. So you have to. So it's not apples to apples. So that when you hear that 130 or 140 number, I think that's because it's a big picture aggregate, and you've got
that makes sense.
And Vicki, have you ever thought about Bruce, saying, "Yeah, I'm just kind of part time," and filling out that data? That data, they would just be like, "This is an outlier. Cast it out."
Bruce is a total outlier. He's working part time this month. I just talked to him. He's working 8 days this month, and he's going to produce $240,000. So that's Bruce working part time.
I was told we're not supposed to trash Bruce on this podcast. Is that correct? Or are we
No holds barred. No holds barred. That's his podcast. Yeah.
That's his podcast. And we always say that, big numbers come through great integrity, because a productive dentist is not constantly redoing their own work, right? So, and I see that to be true. There's this paradox when you're not productive of, well, God, they must be greedy, they must this or that, whatever disparaging things you might think. But the reality is you really are fine-tuned to get above, to even get to average is not an easy feat.
Yeah.
So anyone that's sitting here going, "Man, I'm that average guy," I want to say kudos.
Yeah.
Because dentistry is a great business. I think about restaurants and bars. I would not want to be a restaurant owner.
I was in the restaurant business a number of years ago. It's so competitive. Here's a statistic for you. I want you guys to guess, and I have this in my presentations. In 1970, and I'll show you where I'm going with this. Guess what percentage of dental school students were female in 1970?
Oh, I know that. Less than 5%.
I was going to say 20%.
1%.
1%. Yeah.
1%. Wow. So if you see older female dentists, give them a hug. God knows what they went through.
They were the one in the class of 500.
Exactly. My point being that now there's been a sea change. Now there's well over 50% of dental school students are female, and dentistry is an attractive profession because it provides a good income and some job flexibility, which is a powerful component for women who are trying to balance work and family. Very powerful. Attractive.
Do you see, Doug, because you're in the school so much, do you see that same ratio of female entrepreneurs coming out and that they're starting their businesses and buying businesses, or do you still see that that's more male dominated?
That is a great question. And actually, because I think, and I'm speculating, because of a woman's desire to have more work-life balance, women tend to be more likely to join a DSO, a dental service organization, or to become an associate versus buying their own practice. Because they're thinking more like, how can I get balance? And the men tend to be, the male dental students tend to be more likely to start their own practice sooner than a female dentist.
I would love it if you get some true numbers on that and do some research. Let's get you back to talk about that. Because in my experiences with my practices, I had as many, what do you call it? It's like they're the daddy moms. So my male doctors were like, oh no, I can't make that meeting because my 2-year-old's birthday is that day and I can't be there.
Wow.
Oh,
and so I'm getting a lot more sentiment from, and I respect it. And I was like, wow, this is a new phenomenon. Look at that. And the women are like, yeah, I got a nanny. Let's go. So I think there's stereotypes, and I think some of that's true, and I think some of that's dangerous. I'm looking for the numbers, because I'm a female entrepreneur. I want to know
I have some numbers in my presentation. Remind me, I can dig up some stats
that'd
for
be
you.
great.
It's kind of fascinating.
We're 50% of the market coming out, but are we 50% of the market in what I call that traditional independent, not going into a DSO? So there's a question for you. Corporates are coming in and consolidating. I believe that's a good thing. I think part of that is necessary. I think there's going to be a balancing out of this. So what do you think is the future for the independent dentist like Chad, who says, I've been in it 15 years. I want to do it another 20 years. I'm going to bring in associates. I'm going to buy partners. I'm going to do my model. What do they have to do to stay competitive? Or is it a viable model? Should we all just like turn it in now?
Live and let live.
Live and let live, like the physicians did. Do we just roll over? What do we do?
Well, big picture, it's a viable model, but super big picture, as you two can probably appreciate, the reason why DSOs will continue to grow is tied to a basic business concept, economies of scale. I can run 10 offices per office cheaper than you can run one. That's why Walmart can sell detergent cheaper than the corner drugstore, right? We all know that. Okay, so in that world, when a DSO comes in and looks at a practice to buy, they put them into 3 different quadrants. They have what they call the low producers, let's say 0 to 650,000 a year. Okay, they have the mid-market producers, let's call it 700,000 to about 1.3 million, and then they have the high ends that are 1.3 and above. Want to buy a practice that's doing $400,000 a year because it's too messed up. They actually don't want to buy a super producer. If you do 1.5 or 2 million, they don't want to buy you because they need to get a return on their equity, the return on their investment, and you've already become a superstar.
You're the rainmaker.
They don't want you. You're too expensive. What they want is that sweet spot of someone who does 800,000, 900,000, a million, who's good but not great. Because then they can come in and they can put in some efficiencies, some shared services and other things.